Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 11th of January 2012. My name is Totalbiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of community interaction, gaming discussion, and all that good stuff. You can email him mailbox at cynicalbrit.com, that's mailbox at cynicalbrit.com, with topics for future shows. Game in the background is Force Unleashed 2, not a good PC port. I picked this up on sale ages ago. Never really got around to playing it because the game is apparently not all that amazing. It is kind of alright in places, and I kind of like the original game. It wasn't a great game, but it was okay to pass the time. But seriously, 30 FPS lock? Why? Why do you do this? I cannot imagine. 30 frames per second just feels uncomfortable to me these days. Alright, first email comes in from Yogi, who is after my picnic basket, and says this: I've been watching your channel for a long time now, and you've shown me some amazing games, one of which is Shadow Era. I've always been a huge fan of CCGs. I even played the online Maple Story CCG, which was quite enjoyable until it was cancelled. Anyway, to my question. I logged on to Shadow Era today and saw that there are real cards for the game. They're actually making them. I was ecstatic to hear this news, so I went to the site and bought a deck to help support them. However, this made me realize how it could harm the game. Shadow Era shines, in my honest opinion, because it's a digital card game. This makes it possible for the devs to balance the game by tweaking the cards. In Magic, if a card is too powerful, it is banned. Shadow Era doesn't have that problem because it's all digital. Do you think that since they are now becoming tangible cards, that the devs will no longer balance the cards on the game, or if the cards in real life will no longer match the cards online after a period of time? I think it's very likely they won't match them after a period of time. I think the thing about the Shadow Era physical launch is that, bear in mind, this isn't kind of an indie-developed game. It's got fairly popular. I mean, it's got quite a few players. It's certainly not struggling. And then they were able to get the funding, and I also bought some. In fact, I actually bought, like, the biggest pack you could get, because I love CCGs, and I like supporting these guys. I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to do with them all, because no one in my area is going to have the things, but I think it would just be nice to have it as a collector's item. I might not even take it out of the boxes. It's always nice to have something like that every now and again, but anyway, I have a feeling that as a physical game, it's not really going to get anywhere. I mean, actually distributing a CCG is a very expensive thing to do, and in this case, they're pretty much doing a Kickstarter in order to produce it. So honestly, I think this is just kind of a bunch of fan stuff. I don't really think that they're going to get this into stores in a major way. And as a direct result, I'm not so concerned about the idea of balance. Considering the very small form launch and the very niche audience that this is aimed at, I honestly don't see the point of errataing things out. The idea of banning cards and things like that and producing updated versions of cards with different sets, that's fairly common in CCGs, and as a result, I don't think it's going to be all that much of a problem. They will most definitely focus on their online. There's no question about that. They know which side their bread is buttered on. The game was launched as a multi-platform card game, and all of their income up to this point has come in from that. To the point, by the way, that you get like an equal number of shadow crystals depending on how much you spend on the cards. And let me just have a look. I'm just going to head over to the website right now and look at this information. So the pack that I got, the complete playset, which 33 other people have gone for as well, it's $300. It's got 800 cards in it, playmat and things like that, but more to the point, you get 45,000 shadow crystals with that. That's $300 worth of shadow crystals. Not only that, but from what I can see, now they've actually hit the $20,000 mark, they can put codes on all of the cards, which you can redeem for an equivalent amount of shadow crystals. So, like, they're almost, as far as I can tell, making a loss on these cards, from what I can tell. It seems like just something they want to do because it's kind of cool. I don't think it's really a massive profit-making venture for them. Sure, it'll help spread the brand, but really it's almost, as far as I can tell, a little bit of a loss leader in that respect, because these guys are not going to be spending money on shadow crystals. They're going to have spent money on cards, which give them that amount. Like I say, I've just basically bought $300 worth of shadow crystals, and the cards are kind of a bonus with the playmat and stuff like that. So I'm not too concerned. I think it's cool that they're able to do it. I really do. I'm so pleased that the game is actually doing well, because I really do enjoy it an awful lot. But there is still a lot they need to do. Yes. They really have to improve the method of buying cards, trading cards, and just improve their interface in general, because at the moment it's not up to standard, and it does reduce my enjoyment of the game. But aside from that, it's really solid, and I wish them every success in the future with it. This email comes in from Mio that says, Hi TB, my question today regards the use of narrative in games. Recently I found myself playing Assassin's Creed Revelations, while although I quite enjoyed it, was very much the same Assassin's Creed 2 recipe cooked up again for a third time. Because of this, I soon found myself playing the game mainly for its story and its aesthetics, more so than any actual interaction with the game's mechanics itself. Truth be told, I found the cinematic direction and character development to be so tightly directed that I enjoyed the game right until the very end. Tired game mechanics be damned. And, inappropriately Ubisoft fashion, the story had a distinct flavour of bizarreness to it, all the while still remaining faithful to the characters and developing them well. So my question is this: do you think that both an enjoyable narrative and an enthralling aesthetic are good enough excuses for developers to serialize a franchise that doesn't properly innovate on its gameplay with each iterative release, or is it simply a case of laziness? I would appreciate your thoughts on this. Well, don't give them ideas. That's certainly one thing to say. I don't really have a problem with games being iterative, especially if they are, as you said, very strong on the narrative side of things, because to me it's kind of like watching a television series, and from season to season you don't expect massive innovations. In fact, sometimes you don't want them. Like characters being killed off and things like that. If I've got a favourite character, I don't really want him to get killed, and if he's then not in the next season, I may enjoy the next season somewhat less. It's the same kind of principle that you can apply to iterative video games. I think that Modern Warfare 3 and Assassin's Creed are both examples of games that certainly have had an awful lot of iteration going on within them, and before Modern Warfare 3 you can look at what kind of innovations were made, and really there weren't all that many. Oddly enough, most of the innovation in that game has actually been done in the Treyarch versions of Call of Duty as opposed to Infinity Ward. You look at Black Ops and you'll see things that are fairly innovative for the series there. I mean, they're not exactly groundbreaking in terms of anything else, but for the series, it's like, yeah, this is different, this is a step away, and then of course it was all just thrown away in Modern Warfare 3, and really the only innovation that's actually in that game, I think, is the kill streak system and the changes to it, strike packages, as they're called. That was it, and everything else is pretty much identical. It's just extra stuff, extra tweaks here and there. There's nothing truly innovative about that game. And in that case, people do tend to get upset. They really, really do. They view it as something of a roster update than anything else, and they do feel ripped off by that. You've also got to be careful, though, that you don't muck about with the mechanics that people really, really like, and you don't screw the balance up to the point where people stop enjoying that version and go back to an older version, which you can't make any more money out of. Assassin's Creed, though, is a different kind of beast, because Modern Warfare 3 really doesn't have the staying power, story-wise or narrative-wise, because the campaign's only about 4 hours long. In fact, a lot of people don't even bother with the campaign, myself included. We got it for the multiplayer, and that was it. Assassin's Creed, well, honestly, people don't buy it for the multiplayer, which is kind of a shame, because funnily enough, the multiplayer is highly innovative, if you ignore the fact that it's nicked most of its mechanics from a previous game published by Ubisoft called The Ship, which sadly does not, in fact, have much of a community going for it anymore. It still exists, but yeah, I actually enjoy that game a lot, and that's something we need to look at. Might be a nice things at some point. Anyway, regardless. Yeah, you're right. That game is carried very much by its narrative and its aesthetic. The exploration of an amazingly realized world, and it is amazingly realized. Even the first game was stunning, and the way that it actually realized the Middle East around that time, awesome. And Assassin's Creed 2 took that to a different level. I just absolutely loved exploring Renaissance Italy. It was brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But that game has some serious mechanical problems, like, for instance, the fact that combat is really easy. That game is barely designed to challenge you in any respect. All of the challenge in that game seems to be optional. That's a real problem I've got with it there. And that wasn't fixed in Revelations. The game is still too easy. It's been easy now for the last 4 games. Every Assassin's Creed game has been easy in terms of its actual combat. And that kind of wrecks the whole thing, in my opinion, because you're not really a stealthy assassin, because you don't have to be stealthy. You're just a mass murderer. It's not that hard. And you get even more and more tricks and tools as you go further through it in order to be able to do that. I mean, for God's sake, you get a gun. And that makes things rather easy. I'm going to say, oh, bang, you're dead. Okay, no problem solved then. Now, before that, you had to work with a fairly limited arsenal, but you got more and more ridiculous as you went through the various games. However, as you have correctly pointed out, that doesn't necessarily matter if it is all about the narrative. This is something that I like to apply to BioWare games, for instance. What I absolutely do not want in BioWare games are mechanics getting in the way of the storytelling, because BioWare is always strongest when it comes to character development and storytelling. It's why I stopped playing Dragon Age 2, because I got too frustrated with it. I found the combat to be so incredibly monotonous that I had no interest in dragging through it, and if I turned the difficulty up, the combat just became ridiculous. And just beating on this guy with a giant sword and he just wouldn't die. It's like, this is frustrating and annoying, and hey, look, there's another wave of units that came out of nowhere. What the hell is going on? Ugh, it was unbelievably stressful. I didn't like it one little bit. But the other games that BioWare have put out in the past 5 or 6 years, and yeah, absolutely, I've played all of them and I've beaten all of them, which is fairly rare. I don't tend to be able to do stuff like that simply because of lack of time. In the case of Assassin's Creed, I think that the mechanics do not get in the way of the storytelling and the character development. And as a result, people really, really enjoy it. Is it okay to set aside innovation in terms of serializing a plot line and character development? In my opinion, yes, if it's good enough. If it is good enough. You're talking about paying $60 for something that is going to be telling you a story maybe for 20 to 30 hours. It better be a damn good story, and also it better not sacrifice the game mechanics and the actual game part to the point where you're barely playing it, you're just watching it. That's the real risk, in my opinion, that the game part gets taken out, and this is happening already. It's happening in a lot of first-person shooters, for instance. More and more of the decision-making in the game part is being taken out in favor of showing you these set pieces and trying to tell you some half-assed military story. That's why I hate the Battlefield 3 single player. It's why I hate the Modern Warfare 2 and 3 single player, as well as Black Ops and any other modern shooter that just drags you by the hand there. The narrative is not enough to keep that going. And I have a feeling that more games actually don't get away with what you're suggesting than do. Assassin's Creed is one of those games where I will accept that, honestly, and I do enjoy exploring all of those games and soaking in the atmosphere and the narrative. Many games can't pull it off, though, and I'd certainly not put it up there as a recommended course of action for developers to serialize their game and claim that the narrative is enough to keep people coming back for more, because chances are it probably isn't. Gamers are a very varied bunch. Some will accept that, some will not. I will if it's executed very well, but if I'm focusing too much on the mechanics and I see that you guys haven't pushed your game forward or fixed some of the problems that were in the previous titles, I am not going to bother staying there for the rest of the story. I'm just going to get pissed off and leave and play something else. This email comes in from Stan that says this: I've been wondering what the next step in evolution for esports would be, more specifically how to reach a bigger crowd and get more attention. Should StarCraft 2 be the leading man, or won't we see an explosion of popularity regarding esports till the other games have a more significant following? What do you see as being the next step? On a side note, I remember the finals at DreamHack where the crowd wasn't exactly thrilled to see Quake or Street Fighter, even though it was the finals for the series. With StarCraft 2, however, you had an entire stadium cheering sometimes for no particular reason whatsoever. I'm just wondering why people are watching StarCraft 2 more so than anything else in the esports scene. The difference in popularity with the public is very obvious. Just look at the numbers on the Twitch TV front page. What can others do to catch up or even surpass StarCraft 2 in that respect? What games do you think could actually do that in the current or the future? A little diversity in material could make esports even bigger than it is today. Potentially it could, yeah. I think that expecting a primarily StarCraft 2 audience to also go ape for Street Fighter and Quake is fairly unrealistic. It's the same as expecting a football crowd to go ape for cricket and then hockey, played in the same stadium on the same event. I don't necessarily agree with smoshing esports together. Even like Street Fighter. Street Fighter is probably the one that is most accepted, honestly. I've seen tournaments that have had both Street Fighter and StarCraft 2 at them, and the crowd has been, for the most part, pretty respectful, honestly. They have understood it, and I think it helps that we do have quite a lot of StarCraft 2 players that have also expressed an interest in Street Fighter. We have commentators that have, say, Tasteless and Artosis play Street Fighter. I play Street Fighter. Polo plays Street Fighter. He's actually pretty good, honestly. And Street Fighter is something that I think we can all, to some degree, relate to because we may have played it at some point in our lives. The real difference between StarCraft 2 and pretty much everything else that I've explained to a lot of people is that every other esport at this point pretty much relies on you having a basic understanding of the game and most likely playing it in order to enjoy it. This is something that I pointed out very much with World of Warcraft, with the PvP arena esport that was around for a couple of years and really isn't all that popular anymore because it's kind of garbage. At least in terms of spectator anyway. It still happens within the game, but as an actual esport, in terms of a big spectator event, it is pretty much dead. I mean, Blizzard was pushing it really hard, and I'm seeing the same kind of thing going on with League of Legends as well. LoL's enthusiasm comes from its massive player base and the amount of money that's being thrown at it by Riot. You can't watch League of Legends without as far as I'm concerned, either having played LoL or at least played a Dota game. Most likely LoL, because there's enough differences in the game to confuse people. StarCraft 2 is watched by a lot of people that don't play the game. That is the massive difference. That's the big dividing line between that and everything else. You do not have to have played StarCraft 2 at all in order to appreciate it. And more often than not, yes, people who have never picked up the game in their lives will watch StarCraft 2 esports. Why? That's really hard to explain. I don't know what specific factor causes that to happen. I've had some hypotheses, for instance, on the issue. For instance, the fact that the way that a battle flows can be kind of compared to the way that a football field flows, the idea of an army going across the map and then being pushed backwards and forwards. I think that there's a certain obvious comparison there, especially with the idea of end zones. I mean, if you're in your opponent's base, that's probably bad. If you've got the ball and you're in your opponent's end zone for American football, that's pretty damn bad as well. So there are things to look at there. But aside from that, it's really hard to explain. StarCraft 2 isn't really like a sport. When I had to explain it to someone, it was actually at Barcraft in Newcastle. I explained this to one of the staff there, and she'd never played StarCraft. She had played Diablo, so I think that probably helps, having played at least a game that is like a game as opposed to like Farm Frenzy or whatever. She's played Diablo, so I suppose she has a bit of an inherent understanding of how Blizzard works there. But I explained it as, this is a game that is a mixture of chess and poker. And I think that's the absolute best analogy you can possibly give for StarCraft 2, because no other sport really has the element of economy in it that StarCraft 2 has. Only poker. Poker is the only thing you can describe. And also the idea that a lot of the actions are hidden. That's another thing you can say with poker. You even use the same terms. All in, for instance. That's something that is used in both StarCraft 2 and poker as a term. And then, of course, you mix it with chess. And chess is fairly obvious. The comparison, the strategic idea, the idea of positioning, using one piece to counter another. And I explained it as like saying, well, what happened if you were playing chess against your opponent and you had one pawn each, and you had to bet money in order to actually get more pieces onto the field, and you gradually built up your army onto that? It's kind of the same thing. But that's as close as you get, and it's not because it's a comparison to other sports. I actually think, honestly, that it is stronger because it's not compared to other sports. And I know for a fact I'm not going to answer your question properly here, because I don't know what the next stage for esports is. I'll be totally honest with that. I think it's just going to grow from where it is. StarCraft 2 is going to get more popular, and as more and more people watch streams and watch online TV as opposed to watching actual terrestrial television, esports will grow in popularity as a result of that. It will not make it onto TV as far as I'm concerned, at least in its current state. Anyway, I think the fact that StarCraft 2 is not like a sport actually plays in its favor. Loads of people play the FIFA games. Those of you who don't know what FIFA is, it's basically soccer. It's proper football. It is a very, very popular series. Like, in Europe, FIFA is pretty much as popular as Madden is in the US. And Madden isn't really sold in Europe, or more specifically the UK. The UK is hugely into FIFA, and Pro Evolution Soccer, of course, but FIFA for the most part. That game sells millions upon millions of copies every year. But the esports scene for that, while it does exist, doesn't have a very large spectator following at all. Why? Because why watch fake football when you can watch real football? You can't really watch space armies battle each other in real life, can you? I think that's something that's fairly unique, and perhaps the people that are looking for something different that still has all the thrilling elements of sport, but they're bored by traditional sport and they want something a little bit more fantastical, a little bit more out of this world, may find StarCraft 2 more appealing. Aside from that, it's really, really hard to explain exactly what makes StarCraft 2 stand out from other esports as perhaps the most spectator-friendly esport there currently is on the market. I have no idea why that is, aside from the reasons I've just given, and really I'm just speculating. Alright folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the Mailbox, and I will see you next time.